Hello. Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator this evening. And our guest is Dennis Mills, who's the director of the Calaveras County Water District. And boy, does he have a lot of knowledge. We're going to really enjoy this program. Welcome, Dennis.
So we meet again.
Yeah. Now, this is the second time on the program, and we just got into a few things, and the time just ran out. Hopefully, we're going to be more organized this time and be able to share more information with the public. And you've done wonders with the as a director on the water district, and also there's several other things that you've done that I admire. But why are you doing all this? What's your story? Do you have a family? Do you have any time for them?
Well, that's a very good question. The motivation to be involved goes back to the 2013 rate hikes. And at that time, I stood before the board and I said, "You got my attention." And it was important for me to and to my family, because if people are going to continue to live here in this county, the one thing that they can't afford is continual cost of living increases, especially if you're on a fixed income or you're on low income. You don't have any options. You have to make cuts and sacrifices elsewhere. So the choice is either get involved and try to make a difference on it, or maybe find somewhere else to live. And I'm not one that likes Montana. So
I don't want to leave either.
No, I don't want to leave. And that's the important thing is that I've lived in this county for over 30 years and raised my kids here. And so I'd like to continue to retire here and know that it's going to be a secure place going forward.
One of the well, I guess you're probably our best expert on water issues. And underlying that is the drought. But even more important than that is what is the real picture, historical picture on droughts in California. Apparently this notion that this is caused by man-made global warming is not quite holding water, because the history shows otherwise.
It's not. My grandfather was in the logging operations in Tuolumne, Calaveras County, way back when. And if you take the time to go back in the last 2,000 years through tree ring studies as well as silt and sedimentation on the rivers, you'll know that in the last 2,000 years we've had 100-year drought cycles. This is nothing more than a continuation of a cycle. And we had, for instance, just before the gold rush, little did we realize that we had just completed one of the two longest and most severe droughts in California prior to 1850. But by the time we were walking to the gold fields through Manteca, they were knee-deep in water. They didn't understand why there was so much water. And so over the years, we have come to depend upon the snowpack as our reservoirs. And the snowpack being the reservoirs meant that we didn't need to rely so heavily on the rivers themselves or lakes or reservoirs that we built. But in the last 40 years, have we built another reservoir? Our state has increased in population by a third again, and yet we've not added additional sources of water. If you think about it in terms of bottled water in a refrigerator, you're going to have so many bottles in that refrigerator to take care of the population, or eventually there won't be any bottles. Right. And that's kind of where we're coming to. But we've kind of created our own problem in a way. For instance, I was very involved in the killing of the wild and scenic status on the Stanislaus years ago, back in the 80s. It's important to understand that New Melones was built for 3 specific reasons, and those reasons were recreation, irrigation, and flood control. There was no fish involved back then. So when we think about why are the fish releases going on, what is all this about? Well, that came about as a result of the 1995 San Joaquin Settlement Agreement, whereby the state started to impose a need to desalinate the delta and to provide additional fish flows. So the fish didn't really come into the picture until 2000, 2001 on the Stanislaus. Now, has that been an ongoing problem? Yes, to some degree. If you think about how do we respond in terms of our water supply? Where are we getting our water supplies from? I mean, we're a major source for the entire state of California right here in Calaveras County, and the amount of water that we provide to the state. But it could easily be lost or mismanaged by entities way beyond our control if we're not carefully determining our own fate. So to that end, if you look across the board, you say, where can we make the greatest impact? If we can't hold snow as a reservoir, then we're going to have to start thinking differently, and as a population. That means that the reservoir needs to be the ground. I go back to the 87 complex fire in Tuolumne County, the 92 Gulch fire. I was a firefighter on both. And after those fires, what happened? The creeks started running again. The rivers started flowing again. Why? Because there was no vegetation to take up the moisture. So as you reduce the vegetation loading that we have now, we're primed again for a major fire in the Middle Fork of the Stanislaus. If we take that vegetation and limit it, take it out, then we're going to start having additional water supplies available, and that speaks directly to what Cliff Edson and his thoughts were about his watershed management plan. So we have to be thinking about other ways that we can develop reservoirs. The state isn't going to let us build real ones. We have to think about our ground as being the place.
That seems to connect to what happens in modern forestry practice when you have tree farms, even age growing. And sometimes that's slandered as clear cutting, but which is supposed to be a bad word. They space the trees scientifically apart, so the trees get that wonderful nutrient CO2, and then also sunshine, and they're far enough apart where they cast shadow on the ground where the snow can remain. If the trees are too close together, then the snow is on the branches and it just doesn't last. It's gone.
It evaporates.
Yeah. So we greatly reduced our timber harvesting practices over in recent years, in the last 20 years. And almost parallel with that was a mismanagement of our forest. There was no longer the new trees being planted and the proper forest management. And I wonder if we could just simply, by increasing the yield, increasing the land available for logging, we would come to solutions without any cost to the taxpayer.
That's absolutely true. When you think about the federal government and their thought process behind managing the forest, you'll see very quickly that they feel that they can manipulate the end result. And nature has a way of throwing monkey wrenches in their plans, as an example is going on right now. When they say, we want to keep a certain temperature in the river, I can remember in the early, 77, you could walk across the Stanislaus. It happened many, many times previously. So the idea of saying we have to have a certain amount of water in the river and a certain temperature of water in the river, what happened before we got here? And the fish did just fine.
Yeah.
So they come back when the environment is good enough for them to come back, and they'll stay away when it isn't conducive to their livelihood. So thinking the government's spending millions and millions of dollars and wasting billions of gallons of water trying to, in essence, alter or change the natural course of things on these rivers and these watersheds.
I understand we now have $1 million fish.
Well, it's actually $2 million fish.
$2 million fish. Man, can you imagine what a dinner that would be?
Yeah, they identified 9 steelhead on the Stanislaus. And all of the attempts to push the water pulses out of Maloney's and drain Maloney's has been directly to try to get those fish to go out to sea.
And how many fish are there?
9 of them.
9 fish.
9 fish. Now, if you take this and you take it a step further, as you know, the Mokwise project on the McCollum has already identified a project that they want to put up there. And their first project is going to be to introduce an endangered species called salmon above Part E. Now, why would they do that? There's one primary reason. If you have an endangered species in the river, you can control the river.
Oh, I see.
You can't control it if there's nothing there to have a reason to control it. So is that going to be to our benefit to have controls on a wild and scenic status along the McCollum, where the wild and scenic will actually include the fingerlings that go out into private property, and where they're going to say you can't divert but this much water, and we're going to have you change your lifestyle? I would say to anybody who wants wild and scenic, if you're willing to completely abandon the river to public use, abandon it to the human footprint, I'm all for it. But I can tell you the other side's not willing to do that. And that creates a conundrum, because we're still going to need water here over the years. And that kind of speaks to the general plan. You know, that there's been many hue and cry about the general plan and trying to get a water element in there.
Right.
And the more I think about this, we've been delaying the general plan for how long? Years and years.
10
and
years.
Yes. Multiple groups of supervisors have come and gone, and planning directors have come and gone, and we can't seem to get it done. But what's so important about it is that is a base document for our going to the state and to the federal government for assistance or financing, so that we can continue to do what we need to do to properly support the population and the future population which may be here. And without that document in place, we've got nothing to stand on. So it's going to be very important, and I plead to the supervisors, don't add anything in, don't delay it, get it done. We can do amendments later. We can add a water element later, we can do community plans later, but get us a document that we as the water agency can live with and work with as a basis of our decisions that we make with the state.
Would you say that a good deal of our public thinking is oriented toward receiving funding from the state and federal levels?
It is so unfortunate. And the point is there's strings tied, always attached. I read deeply into many of these grant funding opportunities, and I always see Agenda 21. I see a need to meet the requirements, and if you don't meet the requirements, they're not interested in giving you the money. So I don't want to have strings attached. I'd like us to be able to do what's best for our citizens without having to kowtow to somebody else's rules and regulations and how they think it ought to be.
Well, it seems like there's ways to create infrastructure that the people need. In the case of water companies, there's ways to maybe, if it's public, to have bond issues, perhaps. And there seems to be access to capital without going to Sacramento and without going to the federal government. And then when you look at the picture of the federal government with the $18 trillion in debt.
We're just adding to it.
Yeah. And it's almost at a point of no return, where you don't have enough fuel to make your destination and not enough fuel to return.
That's true.
Yeah, and so encouraging the federal government to give us money is almost like like dog-tail logic, where the dog chases its tail, and the faster it goes, it still doesn't get the tail.
It's created its own industry.
Yeah, but it's a lot of activity there with that dog chasing its tail. But the federal government takes money out of one of our pockets and then goes and puts part of it back in another pocket, and we're so grateful to get the part back that they give us.
And as they give it to us, they say, but you can only do this with it, or you have to follow these rules to do it. So the point is, why don't you just give us the money without rules attached? And
or not take it.
Every agency is in that spiral right now.
Yeah.
No matter where they are. And it's unfortunate because of the cost of regulation, the cost of doing business, so to speak.
Right.
So
to increase the level of wisdom, number one, it has to be apparent. And it has to be factual and truthful. And I think it's all that. The need for communities and even states to become independent and be responsible for their own
their own futures.
Their own future. This is something that I think any human being can grasp. But it takes education, and it takes, frankly, it takes our media. Our media has been asleep on the nature of this problem, but thanks to little programs like this and maybe some other ones, we might slowly turn this around so that our children can live in a free society.
Yeah, I'm not expecting this drought, and you've heard it before. The estimates were originally that the drought might go to 2035, and from what's going on now, it may stretch even longer than that, with some wet but not wetter than normal periods. So when you think about what the effect is going to have, this is the new norm. We have to think differently. And I'll give you an example of that. FEMA has spent a lot of time and money on flood plains, flood maps, and the costs associated with the economic impact of having those in place.
Right.
Why isn't there a federal program to deal with droughts and drought areas and drought maps and the economic impacts that come from that as well?
How about planning for the 100-year drought?
Exactly.
We plan for the 100-year flood.
But we've never planned for a 100-year drought. And yet it's a common factor that is in the West, in the western states. And if we don't start thinking in those terms, it's going to catch up with us. What is that going to mean? It might mean population shifts. It might mean having to find alternate ways. You know, desal is not a new technology by any means.
Right.
But there are currently 17 desal plants either on the boards or in the works in California as a result of what's going on right now. One of them will be down near San Diego in Carlsbad. It's coming online in 2016.
Okay.
There have been 2 other previous attempts that have been shut down by special interests because they think that salt going back into the ocean somehow is harmful. Well, if they were right to that, wouldn't the EPA be the first one to be there closing their doors? And yet in Tampa Bay, Florida, they've had a desal operation there that literally makes millions of gallons a day and is doing it successfully. They've been doing it for over 10 years. So the technology, but what drives desal is going to be cost. In other words, when we say to ourselves, 4 years ago, we could get water at $500 an acre foot. What is the price now? And will it go to $2,000 an acre foot? Is that the break point to start thinking about alternate sources of water, such as desal? Or is it going to be $6,000 an acre foot before you finally say that's going to be the crossover point?
Right.
Somebody has to decide what that decision is going to be and then be in front of it. And that's the problem with this drought is that we really haven't been in front of it at all. We're being very reactionary to every piece of it as it comes on our plate. Yeah. And that's a very dangerous thing. A good example of that is Tulloch. You know, who'd ever thought that there would have been even a discussion that there would be a lowering of Tulloch?
Right.
And yet the reality is, I remember when there was no Tulloch. And because there was no need for it because of Old Maloney's didn't need it. It was simply a reservoir that came and went every year. It was normal to the business. But we didn't think about that when we placed our, CCWD did, when they placed their intake. There should have been an alternate intake left in place down lower, and there is one there, by the way. There's some pipes that go 50 feet below our existing intake at Tulloch.
Oh, there are.
The pump's been removed, et cetera, but they're still there. Is it going to be adequate based upon the population size there now? Probably not.
Right.
So that's why we're working to get a pump ordered and to get the material in place so that we have to go deeper. We're going to be prepared to do that. You can't, these are not off-the-shelf items when you decide to order a pump.
You can't go to the hardware store and get a pump?
No. These are specially made and designed to the specific GPM flows and head pressures, et cetera, that you're trying to attain. So it may take 6 months to put the material together to make that happen. And the other part is you know, there's a sewer crossing there in Tulloch, and you know, maybe this would be a perfect opportunity to take care of that as well. So again, we're being reactionary though instead of thinking ahead.
Right. Are there wells in the area that possibly could be tapped to provide water?
In the Copperopolis area, the size of the gallons per minute that you'd need, no. And the quality of the water, no. If you think about it now, go north in Circle 20 up towards Meridian Mine, and what do you have? You have salt water.
Yeah, that's salt mine. There's some of the wells there are salt wells.
That's a massive pool of water up there.
Yeah.
May have to desal it, but if you had to, that would be an option. Is put a desal plant there at Meridian and take it out. That would supply a lot of water for a lot of people for a long time.
When you have salt in an area, the water's salty, and as that water moves in the subterranean, does it filter the salt out as it moves away from there, or does it carry the salt?
Generally it does, because remember, salt water is heavier than fresh water.
That's true, yes.
So being heavier than, it means it'll always sink to the lowest level,
right,
and it will leave its sedimentation or deposit behind as the fresh water percolates out of it. So that's why you have salt pockets, and they mine salt in Louisiana and
right
areas down in there. So very true.
One of the things that our former guest, Carl Rodefer, was talking about is what's happening in the forest and and what could be done. And there's a group that that apparently they put together called the YSS, and I think it's called Yosemite Stanislaus. I don't know what the last S is, but
Okay.
apparently they've got opposing viewpoints together to try to come up with solutions. And they have Mike Albrick, who's a lumber guy, and they have John Buckley, who's on the other side. And and he has lots of hope that group is going to come up with solutions that would help us solve some of these problems. And I hope so too, because communication is so important.
Well, Tuolumne County's in a different situation than we are.
Yeah.
They don't have water rights, and that's part of their problem.
That's
They're
true.
so dependent upon PG&E and Pinecrest, and the Hetch Hetchy project literally is taken away. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there are what are called Pueblo water rights in California.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
That was prior to the settlement by the Americas, so to speak, when the Mexican government started bringing in like Santa Cruz and San Francisco and Los Angeles and San Diego, and those missions had a specific right to water in, under, and around them.
Okay.
And those there's a total of 7, but that's still in place today, and it is a senior water right to everybody that's out there.
In those areas.
In those areas, absolutely true. Now, beyond that, you have your pre-1914 water rights, of which there are several here in Calaveras County that are being held by agencies, and of course we have the post-1914. So we do have water rights in this county, contrary to our neighbors to the south. So
I understand our neighbors to the south sold theirs for $1 million.
they did.
Oh my God.
Had they known what they know now,
Right.
would that have changed? I think the miners, when they were here, they were very intelligent on how they used water and how they moved water around. There are many canals and ditches throughout Calaveras County that people have long since forgotten. They're on maps. People may not realize where they are or what they are, but we still have those ditches, and they're in essence in place if we wanted to come back to using them.
Oh, that's
Just a little fact.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So
Our Calaveras County Taxpayer Association Vice President, Steve Fairchild, who owns Money Caverns, and has expanded his holdings in that area quite significantly, said the same thing. He's discovered these old mining ditches, which are covered over, but it wouldn't take hardly anything to get them operating again.
now think if you drain a lake,
Yeah.
a reservoir such as Maloney's, or any reservoir for that matter, what happens to the groundwater table around it?
Goes down.
It goes down, which means that those people who have private wells around a lake or reservoir that is being depleted are likewise going to be depleted.
That's
And
true.
that's something that I don't think people have really thought about, is the effect of the loss of that pressure, that inflow pressure that a reservoir provides to the neighboring or surrounding aquifer.
Water table, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, we won't know that. Well, I probably New Melones is down so long now that the wells in that area probably
They'll start to be impacted.
should reflect that.
Now, it's interesting, in the town site of Vallecito, next to the post office, if you ever go there, just across the street, you'll see water running next to the street.
There's a spring there.
There's a spring there, and it's still going, even today. It's bubbling out of the ground. We have private wells in that area that are 4 feet off the surface.
Wow.
There's water. So there are areas of Calaveras County that do have a good, stable water source. So it's not unique. But we are unique in one aspect. Our tertiary stream that runs basically through Murphy's down in across Meacham Ranch Road on Highway 49 and then down into the Meacham Ranch area is pretty significant. That's the one that Schmauder Mine off of Dogtown Road is part of. And that is a large body of water that is there. So
San Andreas has the same thing at at the old cement plant.
Exactly. So we have those water locations if we really, it comes down to we need them.
Right. And that's interesting. Now, one of the things that the ratepayers are concerned with at CCWD is the rates going up, and I understand that the board is trying to find ways not to do that.
We froze the rates in our last meeting. Basically, it's going to be go back, look at the budget, see what it is that we've got and how we're going to revise that budget, and maybe come back in September or somewhere around there and look at either making the rate freeze permanent or reducing the rates at that point. Some were questioning, should we do this before or after a budget is in place? I'm on the finance committee, so I see where the options are. I don't want to cut us short, but I'm almost looking at the whole capital R&R program as being a manufactured crisis. Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
And he's right.
Obama said that too.
Yeah, he did. So knowing that many of those projects weren't what I call mission critical. We went out and borrowed $6.3 million right after that because that's what they said they needed.
Right.
And yet 2 years later, we've yet to put $1 towards a single project. So how critical were those projects?
Could have been that critical.
Well, if we're going to put that many projects on the table, don't you think we need to have the staff capable of putting those projects together as an engineering staff or however we're going to do it? Don't you think that we should enlist a good grant writer or somebody that understands water that can help to supplement that?
Yeah.
Which we found additional money. For instance, the Redwood tank replacement up there in the Dorrington area is one of those projects. Only one of those projects was identified as mission critical, and it was down in Copperopolis. But it was already in the 13-14 budget. It had already been budgeted for.
Wow.
So how did it fall? There were 3 of them that are now in the capital R&R that we already had set the money aside. And it's interesting that we want to do it that way. I would just assume that we throw the whole capital R&R program out, give the money back, the money we borrowed,
Right.
and go find money when we need it based upon the need that we have in place at the time.
Right, that's shown.
Much of these projects, go ahead.
We want to thank you for
Oh,
being our guest.
you're welcome.
You know that time runs out
Oh,
when
boy.
you're having fun. And we want to thank you for watching our program. And also consider going to our website. We have so much information there, and that's calaveras.taxpayers.org. And there's also an opportunity to help us a little bit. If you shop at Save Mart, we have a shares card, which you can get, and part of your shopping will be a donation for us. Thank you for watching.